Hello, and welcome to the first session of the TS2 SMB Azure Bootcamp. My name is Michael Copps. I'm a partner technology strategist as part of the TS2 team, which is part of the SMB&D org, which stands for Small Business, Small Mid-Sized Business and Distribution.
And my name is Todd Sweetser. I'm a partner technology strategist as well, also on the TS2 team.
So Todd and I have been spending the past year or so talking in depth with partners about their cloud practices. And time again, over this past year, they want to bring up one topic, and that topic is Azure. So we decided to put together this Azure Bootcamp so that we cover the common questions, and we already delivered these topics over 15 different cities in the United States. So we're going to share a lot of the best practices we learned from those sessions as well. So let's get into the agenda. Session one, that's what we're covering today. We're going to cover basically growing your SMB cloud practice with Microsoft Azure. And then session two that Todd's going to lead coming up, we're going to do a tech dive extending your network with Microsoft Azure, and we're going to talk about virtual networks and VMs. And then in session three, we're going to talk about enhancing your SMB cloud practice with Microsoft Azure Backup, a very important topic. And then finally, we're going to finish up the four-part series talking about identity management and Office 365. So Todd, you talk to partners every day as well. For the sake of this first session, what are some of the common issues, concerns, feedback that you're getting from partners in your day-to-day conversations?
You know, it's really about how do they utilize Azure in their day-to-day practices? How do they purchase it? What is the partner model, right? Because it's not exactly clear to them. And probably the biggest thing comes down to getting down to the nitty-gritty is how do they actually price out a solution? They've got a great idea for a solution, be it an infrastructure-based solution, but how do they price it out? So they have a lot of questions around all those aspects.
Yep. I too field those same questions, and in this first session today, we're gonna try to address all of them. So let's get started. How do you grow your SMB cloud practice with Windows Azure? First, in this section, we're going to cover cloud opportunity in SMB. We're going to go over just an overview of Azure and some of the core selling scenarios, right? If you've been to azure.com, you probably see there's a lot of different options, right? Well, we're just going to cover some of the core ones we think are great for getting started in SMB. Once you decide the offerings you want to focus on, how are you going to transact? How are you going to purchase Azure and deliver Azure to your customer? What's that model look like? And then, of course, next steps, resources, and some action items. And I'll finish out the session with some demos on the Azure portal and a pretty cool showcase of an Azure solution. So we like to start with this slide talking about one of the biggest projects we've had on Microsoft Azure, and that would be the Sochi Winter Olympics site. Now, we don't show you this slide because we expect your first project on Azure to look like this. However, we want you to know that Azure is here, and very big organizations are investing heavily in Azure technology and have already built great solutions like the Sochi 2004.com site that was basically a worldwide site.
And I also like to add, I mean, important to note that this is the same infrastructure that you have access to as partners. It's not any different. It's not a special infrastructure that they used. It is the same Azure tool set that you have access to for your customers in the SMB space.
Absolutely. So what's some of the market opportunity look like in Azure? A lot of you are watching this webcast because either you want to build Azure into your partner practice or your customers are asking you about Azure. So that's reflected in the statistics we've gathered. In this slide, I think a telling statistic, 62% of SMBs right now, and by SMB we mean under 250 seats, right? 62% of them are currently using a cloud technology. So chances are our customers are driving us, the partner, into adopting more cloud technologies like Azure. And then I think at the bottom is an interesting statistic. In SMB, we have a lot of new startup companies. We could say the economy has recovered. 85% of new companies starting up are going to adopt cloud technology. So we want to talk about Azure with you today, and hopefully you'll find that it's a technology you want to build your business on. So why the cloud in general? Why Azure specifically? I call this my dinner conversation piece. If someone asks me, you know what, I'm used to on-premises. I'm not, I'm not ready to invest in this cloud. What are the main benefits of the cloud? This is a conversation anyone could have with somebody interested in moving to the cloud. And first, we're going to talk about the basically the standard story of reduced capital expense, right? Operational expense versus capital expenditure. A lot of SMBs just don't have the money to build out big IT projects, big infrastructure on premises. Moving to the cloud allows you to just get that monthly operational expense. A lot of us selling Office 365 are used to this story, and it applies to Azure as well. Fast time to market, right? We can deliver solutions on this platform that's already built. We don't have to wait to provision hardware, spin up hardware on premises, learn the technology. We can just log on to Azure.com and spin up VMs, which you'll see from Todd later on in this series, within a matter of minutes. Elastic scale is a huge benefit. Imagine pricing out an on-premises solution. What do you typically do when you're pricing out an on-premises solution? You will overbuild. You'll add more memory, more processing, more storage than you typically need because you want to have room to grow into the future. Ultimately, that means you're not utilizing resources initially. Well, with Azure, you pay for what you use. So you don't have to over-engineer. You can use the exact memory, the exact processing, the exact storage that you need. And then if you need more in the future, if you want to grow into that, with a few clicks, you're expanding, you're extending the resources. So elastic scale, absolutely key, and a lot of people understand that. Global availability is huge. We have Azure data centers, as you would imagine, all around the world. United States, we have several data centers. The Far East, EMEA in Europe, we have data centers, Australia, China. And what's unique about Azure is being in the United States, when I provision my Azure resources, I can choose which data center I want to move my Azure resources on. Because I'm in the US, I don't have to do it in the United States. It gives us that true global availability. And then finally, another benefit, and a lot of partners would say this is a challenge, is the consumption-based billing aspect of Azure. We pay for what we use. Todd and I think that's a good thing, right? We're not getting overcharged. Partners, it's a good thing as well. However, it's a great challenge to actually predict what you're going to spend when you don't know what you're really going to use. If you're selling Office 365, it's pretty straightforward, per user, per month. Well, with Azure, you have to predict your usage, and because you're going to pay for what you use. And that's been a challenge for partners. I'm going to address that a little bit later in this series. So if you are a partner of Microsoft and you've invested in the cloud, here's your opportunity. We've got Azure that we're talking about today, but a lot of you are probably already selling Office 365 to a certain extent, perhaps Microsoft Dynamics and Windows Intune. So we think these four solutions allow our partners to have tremendous success in the cloud with Microsoft. So some of the opportunities with building your business around Microsoft Azure, broaden your base or your customer base and services, right? We think by adopting Azure, a lot of our smaller partners, you could just start offering more. You could start doing more things, building more solutions because of the technologies that are in place on Azure. And I'll get into that much later. You're going to get good at delivering the same technology over and over again to your customers. And that's going to result in doing more solutions means more revenue, and you're going to increase your margins by getting better at it, by decreasing your cost of sale, but delivering the same solutions. And then finally, accelerate your speed to market. We want you to really focus on Azure solutions. It's one thing to sell Azure VMs and some of the technologies up there, but what's your solution as a partner? We call it IP, our intellectual property, that's running on top of Azure. That's what's going to make you very interesting to your customers. So let's just quickly define some common industry terms and see where Azure fits and Microsoft solutions fit as a whole. I like this IT continuum slide because it really it covers everything that we're offering as partners and that we're going to as customers. If you look at the far left, physical, right? The physical layer is, I'm running a Windows server in my own data center, right? That's been around forever. Then there was a transition into virtualization. Most of you watching this are probably pretty well versed in virtualization technologies, Hyper-V, VMware, and most of the partners Todd and I speak to absolutely have virtualization expertise as a core for them. But now we're getting into the cloud world, right? Terms like IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS, right? Infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service. So infrastructure as a service is going to be a big focus of Todd and I during this series and in what you can do on Azure. Basically, we're talking about Azure VMs in Azure Virtual Networks, and we're going to dive very deep into configuring those technologies and building solutions on top of those technologies. Then there is the platform as a service. A lot of people, ourselves included, were confused by the term platform as a service. A lot of the Microsoft Azure services being offered when you go to Azure.com are platform as a service. That's different than infrastructure. It basically means that the OS layer and the backend is managed by Azure in Microsoft, and then we're delivering the service to you, and you focus on your application. Azure Websites is an example of that. SQL Database, the database service on Azure is an example of our platform as a service. And then finally, we are all familiar with software as a service, right? Office 365, CRM Online, I think those are the best examples of software as a service. So let's talk about the key Azure selling scenarios. And I love this quote because I think it really does a good job of getting our message across of what we want partners to be thinking about. And it's the first rule of Azure, right, is don't sell Azure. As partners, are we going to our customers saying, hey, you gotta buy these Azure VMs, you gotta buy all these Azure services? Not really. We're going to our customers saying, hey, I have this solution that I want you to purchase that'll give you X, Y, and Z for you to be more productive, save money, etc. It just happens to be running on Azure, right? So our motions, Todd and I as supporting partners, is to get our partners invested on Azure, build awesome solutions running on Azure, and then the customers purchase through the partner and go with the partner solution. Chances are, in a lot of cases, the customers don't even know they're using a solution on Azure, right?
Yeah, and I just to add to that, I think that's probably the key point there. They don't need to know, they may want to know, and doesn't mean they don't have to know, but Azure is a tool set that our partners can use to build out solutions. You need to think of it as a tool set versus an end solution. Hence the reason the customers just need to know what your solution is, not necessarily what the overarching back-end infrastructure is actually comprised of.
Absolutely. So what are the core scenarios we want you to focus on as partners? Like I said earlier, if you go to Azure.com, you will get overwhelmed very quickly. We have over 20 different offerings out there, infrastructure as a service, platform as a service offerings, and it really can be confusing and overwhelming to get started. So in our segment, our SMB partners, we want you to get started with these core scenarios. First, on-demand virtual machines, right? Spin up a virtual machine, make it part of a virtual network, extend that network back to on-premises, and now you're essentially using Azure as a co-located facility as your extended data center. Partners can do this, customers can extend their data centers to Azure. Once your data center is extended, What do you use Azure for? You can move applications up there, you can move domain controllers up there, and you could start taking some of the load off your existing data center on premises or maybe in another expensive co-located facility. Maybe your hardware is aging and you need to do something quick. Azure is a perfect fit for that. The second scenario is, of course, data backup. Azure has a robust data backup service that will basically back up Azure VMs, but also back up your on-premises data. We think it's a great fit for partners currently selling Windows 2012 servers, but might not have a backup solution. Todd's going to go very deep into this very topic. We have the Azure Backup Service, but you can also use other tools, third-party tools, to back up to Azure Blob Storage. So we have a great story around backup, and we'll dive deeper into that later on. Websites. Azure Websites, it's a finished service. It's a platform as a service where you can move an existing website that is running on, chances are you name the platform it's running on, we can just easily move that website up into Azure Websites. So it doesn't just have to be a website running in IIS on a Windows server. It could be on an Apache server or several other different platforms. On Azure Websites, we have over 49 different website templates that you can choose from. It also allows us, because of our global data center architecture, it allows us to scale out and plan for heavy website usage. Sometimes that's not the case in SMB, but oftentimes it can be. The final core scenario, and this one's generated quite a bit of confusion, is identity and access management, right? I've got my username and password to log into my Active Directory on premises, right? Most of us are using AD on premises. How do I use those credentials and start working in the cloud, whether it's Office 365, whether it's Azure, whether it's all these third-party cloud services out there? Do I have a solution that gives me one comprehensive identity management platform? And the answer is yes, we do with our Azure Identity and Access Management solution. We call it Azure Active Directory, and we're going to have a whole session on that as well. And there is a ton of opportunity for partners in handling their customers' identity needs. So the previous slide was what we're covering in our series and a little bit today. Here are the other Azure offerings out there on Azure.com that you might be familiar with that are really out of scope for the discussion that we're having in this series. But I wanted to show them to you just so you know the breadth of offerings that we have. So some that you might want to, that might pique your interest, SQL database, for example. We have, with Azure, you have an option to install VMs and install a SQL server on that VM, or you can use the SQL database service, right, which is a finished service for SQL. So you'll see on Azure, there's a lot of technologies where you have that option. Do I want to build it on infrastructure as a service and manage it myself? Or does Azure have a finished platform as a service where I can leverage a solution like SQL database, like websites, right? Some other notable services on Azure, we've got at the bottom there, Hyper-V Recovery Manager, which will soon be renamed to Azure Recovery Manager, which allows us to manage different Hyper-V sites and soon Azure sites as well for failover purposes. We see that being very important out of scope of what we're going to be talking about. So let's get into one of the most common questions that we get from partners, and Todd mentioned this when I asked him what some of the common feedback was. Pricing out solutions. Every time I talk to a partner, they say, okay, we're ready to go onto Azure, we have a specific project, and we have no idea how to price it out, right? We went to the cost calculator that you'll see right here, but it has 50 different items I can price out. Provide me some guidance. So we think it can be fairly simple as long as you know the components on Azure that make up a project. So the things we need to think about is is do the pricing calculator and take advantage of all the different discounting options, which I'll show you in a minute. And some of these things we're pricing out are consumption based, meaning, yeah, it's going to give me an estimation, but there's the potential of fluctuation. We'll get into that shortly. So before we start pricing out an Azure solution, of course, we want to compare it with a similar on-premises solution. So here's a great slide that basically discusses the cost of building out a solution similar to Azure, but building it out on premises, right? So how much does it cost to procure and operate monthly a typical on-premises server environment? And in this example, we chose two I think, quad-core 8 or 16 gigabyte RAM servers. They approximately $3,800 a piece. And then the equation that they used is, there's two of them, so that's about $7,600. And then the common rule of thumb is you double that to take into account the space, power, cooling, which is important, right? And then the manpower to keep it up and running. So the question is, how much does it cost a month? You know, it's not something we typically do when we build out on-premises solutions, but this particular slide gives us an average of $630 a month. So when we go to Azure and price out a solution, we could say, hey, that's similar, that's far less than what we would pay if we built this out on premises. And it was much easier to do, and we get much more flexibility on Azure.
I would like to add too is a lot of those even on-premises costs are fluctuating as well. I mean, the electrical, there's a lot of variable costs there even with bandwidth. So even in regards to an on-premises environment, you're going to have some flexible and variable costs.
Yep, absolutely. So we put together this sample Azure quote that takes into account a very typical project that we see partners delivering on Azure. And this project, it's a web application server that a customer is running in their environment. It's aging, right? They need to do something. It's AD dependent, and they just want a reliable, highly available platform for their application server. They might want to rebuild it on premises, or they're going to try out this new cloud technology, right? So the quote we put together, basically our proposed Azure solution is we wanted to price out 2 application virtual machines for the application server. And these are medium-sized virtual machines. If you go into the pricing calculator, you'll see there's all kinds of different sizes. We chose medium. A common feedback that we get from partners is, gosh, at first we were building extra large VMs because we just thought we needed that much processing, that much memory, because that's how we did it on premises. But like I said earlier, when you go to the cloud, you only need to pay for, provision what you're going to use. So we always start small. So 2 medium VMs for this application server, 2 domain controllers, because remember I said it's AD dependent. We want to extend Active Directory up into Azure, and we want the Active Directory to be redundant in Azure, so we did 2. We're going to put them both in availability sets for high availability. Now, I could go deep into that right now, what an availability set is. Chances are you're confused, because most partners bring it up to us that they're confused about why we recommend availability sets. Todd's going to go very deep into that in session 2. Just know that availability sets give us that redundancy, that high availability if one of those machines go down. And it's managed by the customer, by the partner in Azure building that availability set. So,
probably most important too, the SLA. You get the SLA, that 99.95% SLA, as long as there's an availability set in place.
Yep, absolutely. I priced out both server solutions, right? And now we need to price out the virtual network for the site-to-site VPN, right? We want to create a VPN from Azure back to our data center on premises. In this example, we have to pay for that by connecting a site-to-site VPN. As you can see, $37.20 a month. Basically, I think it's what, $1.20 a day. So it's a pretty small fee. The great thing is, if you have another office, you can create another site-to-site VPN to that office. I believe it's up to 10. Yep. So I also priced out disk storage, 400 gigs, 20 bucks a month, as you can see, and this is something we all understand. Storage is getting really cheap, right? When we announce a pricing change, it's because our storage price goes down, right? So storage is always going to be a pretty small, unless you're just moving terabytes and terabytes and terabytes of data up there, storage typically is a pretty small fee. Backup, we're backing up 200 gigs in this example of the 400 gigs of data we have up there. Backup's a little more expensive. This is our finished Azure backup service. Of course, if we're going to have something running in Azure, we're going to want to have a valid backup solution. And then egress traffic. So how do we pay for bandwidth? Coming in, coming out. We're not charged as customers for moving anything into Azure. That's not metered. What we pull out of Azure, we're charged for. We call that egress traffic. The feedback I get, that Todd gets from partners, typically it's pretty inexpensive for most scenarios. You know, maybe you're downloading some files from Azure daily, but they're not huge files. It can only grow if you're just pulling, like I said, terabytes of data off of Azure every day. Then that egress can get up a little bit. So the total cost, 531 bucks a month for this project to move an application server, extend your data center up into Azure, and start having that new co-located facility. We think that's a great price and very competitive in the market. So you can get started with your own quotes by just, you know, remembering all the components that you saw on this example quote on how to price out. So also when we're providing, so we just did the quote, when we're providing our statement of work, our quotes for our customers, we have to take into consideration some of the things on this slide. And that's basically some of the patterns on Azure that's going to make our bill fluctuate going forward into the future. It's easy to say, to tell our customers, all right, next month, Azure is going to cost you this much, but what about 6 months, 8 months, a year from now? So we have to start thinking about these things. On and off workloads. That's key. That's a huge opportunity to save money. Maybe you have a server that runs batches or something like that, but it only does it at nighttime. Does that server need to be running during the day? Or maybe you have servers running during the day. Users are accessing these servers. Can you shut it down at night and not pay for it? In some production scenarios, you're not going to want to do that. But maybe there's some scenarios where you do want to do that, and you're not going to pay for that server, that VM, while it's shut down. So growth. We always have to think about growth, right? What you're using in storage today is not going to be the same as 6 months, a year down the line. We have to set that expectation with customers. You saw the storage was relatively cheap, but it is going to grow, just like the graph says. And we have to account for that, set that expectation with our customers. And backup was a little more expensive. That's going to grow as well. As your data grows, your backup's going to grow, right? Unpredictable demand, right? Maybe you have just VMs sitting there off, but if a disaster hits, you pull up those VMs. That's stuff we can't predict, but we're going to have to pay for those VMs once they're spun up. So just keep that sort of those sort of workloads in mind. Websites, right? You run a huge marketing campaign. You're using an Azure website. You have a commercial at the Super Bowl, right? All of a sudden, you're just hammered with requests on your website. The great thing is Azure is going to handle that because of our website platform, right? Our global website platform, but you are going to pay extra for that as you get hit more, right? So, and then predictable bursting is the final one. Line of business applications, seasonal applications, right? We can predict some of this stuff, high usage, and during low usage periods, we can even shut it off, right?
Yeah, one thing to add with that too, with both with like websites and infrastructure and most of the other opportunities within Azure, there's auto scaling capabilities, right?
Yep.
So it can be set to automatically scale up or scale down, and you can put limits on it so you can still control it. But that way, you know that if something gets hit hard with a lot of demand, it will scale up or scale back down based on the overall volume.
Yep. Excellent point. So some examples of partners offerings on Azure. We hear from partners all the time. Partners are really excited. They're building right now these type of solutions on the Azure platform. And this is what Todd and I, this is the kind of information we love getting from these partners. So I'll just go down the line. RDP to a custom app, right? A lot of partners are putting in apps in Azure and then having the users remote into those apps, and basically it's a hosted desktop solution. A GP in Azure for RDP, right? A lot of us sell the GP financial software, put it in Azure and have your finance users remote into Azure. GP's always run in an RDP environment. We can do that on Azure. SharePoint. Highly customized SharePoint. A lot of you out there, you evaluate SharePoint online and say, gosh, it's great, but my customer invested heavily in all these customizations on their SharePoint server. They want to move to the cloud, but we don't want to redo these customizations. Take that SharePoint server, move it up into a VM on Azure. You have a cloud SharePoint now. It's just running in an Azure VM. A very common scenario that we're seeing. ADFS single sign-on running on an Azure VM. I'm going to talk in depth about this in our identity section in session 4. But basically, if you want a true single sign-on solution between on-premises AD and Office 365, you can implement ADFS. It's got a lot of components. A lot of people don't want to implement it on-premises. They implement it in the cloud, right? In Azure VMs. We see a lot of partners leading with this solution for single sign-on. DirSync, Directory Sync, you might be familiar with that tool in Office 365. It's also part of Azure. You can run that in a VM in Azure and basically have that running on a cloud solution just to maximize your high availability, right? Domain controllers extended to Azure, another example I talked about already. Azure Backup for all Windows servers and VMs. Partners are leading. Partners have chosen Azure Backup as their solution to back up customer data. Third-party backup to Azure Blob Storage. I mentioned that a little earlier. Todd's going to go in depth into how we do that, what scenarios we see a little later in this series. Cloud Service Authentication Portal using Azure Active Directory. I'm going to cover this in depth. But partners are offering this, basically a portal for their users to log into to gain access to not only their Microsoft cloud services like Office 365, but also to third-party cloud services like Salesforce.com, Dropbox, Box, anything that you can think of, we probably have a connector for it. And then finally, moving websites to Azure. It's a very simple process. There's a lot of web hosters out there. Maybe you're paying too much. Maybe you already have stuff running on Azure. Maybe you need some scale capabilities. You can easily move that website into Azure. So, as you know, Azure is a cloud solution provided by Microsoft. Like all of our cloud solutions, we are constantly updating them. We're on a quarterly cadence of providing key updates to the Azure service. At our Tech Ed, which was about a month ago, Todd,
Yep.
we announced several key additions to Azure. And you can expect these type of announcements just about every quarter. That's the cloud environment. That's one of the great benefits, right? We're constantly adding great technologies. In red, I've highlighted some of the key ones Todd and I thought were pretty impactful. We really enhanced our virtual networking features, multiple site-to-site VPNs that I talked about. You can now do that on Azure. IP reservations, meaning we can now assign those static IP addresses. That was problematic for some partners early on because our whole lives we're taught, always have a static IP address for servers, and then on Azure, it was very difficult to do that. Well, that's become much easier. Azure Site Recovery, formerly Hyper-V Recovery Manager, that's a new one that's coming that allows us to really use Azure. And it's in preview right now. It's not available, but the Azure Site Recovery allows us to use Azure as a failover site. So we're running something on-prem. On-prem goes down, we recover to Azure. That's a scenario a lot of us are interested in. So as you see, a lot of cool solutions being added. Azure Remote App, I'm actually going to talk about. I'm going to demo that for you in a few minutes.
And the last one I'll mention that was on that slide that I think is pretty handy is Windows Client Virtual Machines. If you have an MSDN, this is specific for MSDN subscribers, but if you're an MSDN subscribers, you can now spin up on Windows 7, Windows 8.1 virtual machines for test purposes, not for production, of course, but it's great and very handy to quickly spin up a client VM to do some testing on that you may need to do, and then, just delete it when you're done.
Absolutely. So let's get into the transaction model. We've shared with you all of the great technology, right? What we want you to focus on. How do we transact? How do we purchase Azure? And how do we sell it to our customers, right? So I like this slide. It really covers all of the different purchasing scenarios. So if you're a customer, not a partner, and you want to purchase Azure, let's start with that. What are your options, right? You can go to azure.com and sign up, put in a credit card. We call that MOSP, our Microsoft Online Subscription Program. You just go straight to the website, start provisioning services, right? Option 2, enterprise agreement. Those of us familiar with Microsoft know if you're a large enough customer, you can sign an EA. Typically, our SMB customers under 250 seats don't sign EAs, but if you're outside of that segment, you'll sign an enterprise agreement. And then, this one's the most important. What is my option as a customer to purchase Azure? I can go to my partner, right? The CSV, ISV, MSPs of the world who are selling solutions running on Azure. That's the focus of today. And then finally, on the bottom, you'll see something that's coming that we're pretty excited about, and that's Azure in Open. Open licensing. If you're a partner, chances are you're aligned with a distributor, Tech Data, Ingram, Synex, and D&H. And you can buy your open licensing through them. Well, we're adding Azure credits into open licensing coming August 1st, so that will just be another option for you as a partner to be able to purchase Azure and then resell that to your customers. How do you profit? Well, channel incentives, right? In FY15, trust me, in SMB, we're going to come out with some great channel incentives for the partners to start selling Azure. Your consulting services on top of Azure, and then, of course, your margins, right? You're going to build your solutions on Azure. You pay Microsoft for the Azure usage, and then you upsell your solution to your customer and make some pretty nice margins depending on what you're offering as your solution. So, if you want to purchase straight through the portal, just go to azure.com. This is the method that we're really leading with our partners. We want them to say, hey, if you're getting started, we really want you to focus in on, just building a few new solutions, and going straight to the website is a great way to get started. And you could do 6-month commitments, you could do 12-month commitments, and as you'll see on the bottom table, that you get some pretty good discounts when you do commit to 12 months. And just because I'm committing to 12 months doesn't mean I have to pay for 12 months in advance. I could pay monthly. You'll see there's a monthly pay and a prepay option that gives you a little bit more of a discount. But the 12-month monthly pay, as long as you commit to 12 months, you get a pretty good discount, even if you're just doing $500 a month. We have enterprise agreement on this slide. Why? I mentioned earlier the customer motion. Customers buying EAs typically are over 250 seats. However, and this is important, if you're a partner, we have a program. We have an enterprise agreement for partners only that allows you to buy Azure on an EA and resell those Azure services to your customers. That doesn't mean you, the partner, have to be a 250-seat company, right? All you have to do, and the criteria is, you have to be able to sell $25,000 worth of Azure in a year, right? And if you think about that, if you're doing some Azure business and you're paying, a little over $2,000 a month, then you might say, you know what, this is about $25,000 a year. I'm going to get a really good discount if I sign that partner Azure EA. However, a lot of our partners are just getting started. So we say go straight through the portal. Just sign up through MOSP, start transacting, start reselling your services through the portal. If you get to the point where you're doing $2,500, $3,000 in a year, then you can contact your Microsoft rep and they'll say, hey, you know what? You're going to save X amount of money by signing that EA. In EA, you get upwards of a 30% discount. So I guess in summary, start transacting on Azure.com. If you start doing a lot, an enterprise agreement specifically for partners might make sense. What are our support options? This usually comes up last, right? You're invested in Azure, you start building solutions, you'll run into a problem, right? We hear it all the time. A lot of different options on Azure, right? And it's easy to get into trouble and have some issues. We need support, right? Just like any technology. We have included with support is basically just a billing type support. So if you need technical support on Azure, you have to pay for it. That's the motto. We recommend our partners start with the developer support option. That's $29 a month. And that will give you, it's great for when you're building out solutions. You don't have customers yet in production, but you at least can call in, get a call back. It's got an 8-hour response time. If you start adding customers, and these are production environments, you might want to upgrade to a standard support plan, $300 a month, or even a professional direct, which is $1,000 if you start doing a lot of volume. And that's going to, when you do have production systems up and running of customers in Azure, you're going to want to invest in support and then carry that cost on over to the customer, right?
So just out of curiosity, do they have to pay per customer per month for each of these? Or not?
Good question. They do not. So it's going to make a lot of sense for a partner. $1,000 a month seems pretty expensive for one customer, right? But what if you had 10, 15? If they're under if you add them, and I'm going to show you in my demo how to add those customers under your partner portal, you could use that one support plan to support all of your customers. So it's really going to start making sense to invest in support once you start adding multiple customers. Let's get started. What are some of the next steps? I really want you to focus on the far left here. You have to use your $100 monthly credit that we give out to partners. I'm going to show you where to get that in the first steps of my demo. It's absolutely key to you getting started with Azure. Maybe some of you already have it, but if you don't, and you don't want to put in your credit card, initially, you can get that $100 credit for being a Microsoft Cloud partner. And then if you look at this slide, there's competencies for Azure. Just go to the MPN. All of this stuff on this slide, go to the MPN, search for Azure. You'll find it. You could get your competencies, and then you could be a gold or silver or gold partner on Azure. There's some how-tos on virtual machines, backup, websites that we already discussed today, and some links to the calculator, which you should easily be able to find on Azure.com. So at this time, we're going to get into the demo. I'm going to show first just some, I call it housekeeping items for Azure. How to set up your partner Azure tenant, meaning how do I log into Azure and then create customer subtenants, and then how to manage them in my Azure portal. And then we'll get into a solution showcase. I'll show you a cool RDS solution in Azure that is a finished product that many partners are offering their customers today. So let's go ahead and get into the demo now. And we're going to start with going to the MPN site and showing you how to get your credits. So let's go ahead and do that. A lot of you are probably familiar with the MPN site, right? You probably spend way too much time on here than you really care to admit. But let's go into the membership tab. and then you'll see core benefits and requirements, right? This is where we go to get all the benefits that we deserve as partners. So I'm going to just scroll down on this core benefits and requirements and go to internal use software licenses, right, under the plan your business. Once I click on this, you'll see that this is kind of my home base for getting my IUR, internal use rights licenses for my business. So I'm not going to do this right now because I'm not signed in as a partner, but simply go to Get Your Software and Online Services right here. It's going to take you to a site where you can get your Azure credits. If you're an Office 365 partner, you're going to get your Office 365 licenses and all of the other software. It's your one-stop place to manage all your software benefits. So go there and at least get your $100 Azure credit. If you need to be an Azure partner or a cloud partner, right? So to be a cloud partner, you could be a silver competent, gold competent, or you need to purchase that Microsoft Action Pack, the Maps subscription.
I definitely would encourage all partners to take advantage of the internal use rights for all the solutions, but specifically in this case for Azure, because it gives basically a free way of getting started and starting to actually utilize a service and getting to learn the services.
Absolutely. So let's go into our account here, and here I'm going to show how you basically create your partner account and then start creating customer subtenants. It's pretty easy. So here I'm on Azure.com and I went to my account and it will show me the two portals that I have, right? I've got my management portal to manage all my Azure services. I'll show you that shortly. And then I have my, my usage and billing portal where I see what I'm being charged, right? And manage all my different subscriptions. So let's go ahead and go into usage and billing and go ahead and log in. This page is where I load different customer subscriptions. I'll have my own subscription listed, and my own personal use Azure subscription has the Visual Studio Ultimate with MSDN, but I can also start adding customer subscriptions. All I do is hit add a subscription, and I could do this 10 times and have 10 different customers listed underneath my subscription. And it will take me to the Azure page where I have the different purchase options, right? And these are the direct purchase options. So I could do pay as you go where you pay the list price. That's great if you want to cancel after a month, 2 months, or 6-month plan where I'm committing to 6 months of usage, or a 12-month plan, prepaid or pay monthly, right? So typically I'd choose the 12-month plan, then it takes you to the mobile verification, payment information, and the agreement. You're gonna wanna go over that agreement when you start adding subscriptions and see if it fits with your business. So that's how easy it is, and then you'll just basically underneath your subscription have all these different customers listed. So what's it look like once you add the customers and start managing them? So let's go ahead and log into the portal. And I will show you the Azure portal and all the different resources in there and how we manage separate customers within that one portal. It's very admin friendly. So here I'm logged into the portal that Todd and I will primarily be using for all of our demos, right? The key scenarios we've talked about, everything's listed on the left. Virtual machines, right? These are all the VMs we've created in our portal. If I scroll down, you'll see networks. These are virtual networks. Todd's going to talk about how to create virtual networks. You'll see websites somewhere on here as well. And then Active Directory. We're going to talk about Active Directory on Azure, Azure Active Directory. That's a focus area. And websites is up here at the top as well. So, and then you can do an all item view. Now, what if I have multiple customers that I'm managing through my portal and I just want to work on one customer? That's easy. You go to subscriptions and you can filter by subscription. I can see all my customers by selecting all of them right there, Or I could say, you know what, I'm going to go to just the demo RWAG account right there, apply that, and see what subscriptions I have or resources I have underneath that subscription. It's important to do this. It keeps your administration pretty clean. Then you don't mix up the customers when you're building solutions in Azure, and it basically puts you in that one customer's portal. So you'll see only the VMs that were built on the RWAG subscription. So there. So let's shift gears to the solution showcase. I want to show you an RDP solution running on Azure. And like I said earlier, a lot of partners are leading with this as their main solution. They're moving services up into Azure, and they want users to log in through RDP and have that hosted desktop. It's something partners have been doing for quite some time. Well, now they're doing it in Azure. So here you'll see I have my RDS, if you look at the address bar at the top, rds.msts2.com. That's a vanity domain that I have pointing to Azure. So we'll go ahead and log in. And this is going to take me, this would be the typical user experience using this solution. Maybe you have a workforce distributed throughout the nation, maybe throughout the world, and you don't manage their PC, but you need them to be productive. Say, go to this website, log in with these credentials, and you can be productive and start using remote desktop and remote apps. So here you'll see I have several different shortcuts to remote desktops. So a user can get into an Azure RDS session. This is a server running in Azure. I can remote in and start using the desktop, the applications within that RDS session. Or I can even link to on-premises solutions as well that we have maybe running in our on-premises network. Not only connecting to a remote desktop, I can also connect to remote apps. So let's try connecting to a remote app. Here you'll see we have Office 2010. Maybe I have a need for 2010. I can go ahead and go into Office 2010 and open up a remote application session of Excel, Word, PowerPoint. Or let's go back, and I can show you 2013. Maybe you have a need for 2013, and you give the users that choice. So we have all those applications that are able to stream, right? These aren't running on my desktop. I'm streaming these through remote app. That concludes the showcase for RDS. Let me show you something cool. Think of it as the finished service of RDS, and we call that remote app. It's the ability to do the same thing I did in this demo, but as a finished service offered on Azure. So I'm going to go ahead and open up my Azure portal, and I will scroll down here on the left-hand side and click on the remote app. And notice how the caveat is this is in preview right now, should be launching soon, but at least we can get in there, test it out. I would say this is more of the platform as a service compared to the RDS solution I just showed you, which is infrastructure as a service. It's a RDS technology running in our VMs. This is a remote app service that doesn't have any VMs, right? It's more of a finished service. So I will go ahead and click on the remote app dashboard. Here you'll see I can publish programs in remote app, similar to how in the RDS we had Word, Excel, we had Office 2013, Office 2010. I can publish in there and give separate users access. I can see who has an open session right here, and then it's going to give me the link to go download the remote app client right here. I've already done that. So if I click on my desktop and go ahead and click this right here, this is the remote app client, right? Users are running this. Chances are it's a shortcut right there on their toolbar, like I had. And then they can open it up and they can do it on a variety of devices, which is key, right? A colleague of ours just installed it on his iPad, right? And is able to stream these through remote app on his iPad. So I can initiate an Excel session, a Visio session, Microsoft Outlook, Word 2010, any application you want to publish, it goes right here in remote app. And let's go ahead and open up Word. As you can see, it's the same technology as RDS. It's opening up that remote app session, and we'll give it a second here, but essentially what it's going to do, it's going to load Word, right? So let's go back to the presentation and finish out here and just talk about the summary of what we've talked about in the session. So what are our key takeaways? There's tremendous opportunity in SMB. Specifically on Azure Infrastructure as a Service and Platform as a Service offerings. So make sure you don't miss out on this opportunity. If you're getting started, focus on the core offerings that we discussed and that we're covering throughout this series: VMs, websites, backup, and identity. And choose a transaction model that fits for you, right? Go to azure.com, start transacting, start adding customer subtenants, or if you're confident you can do quite a bit of business, or you're already doing quite a bit of business on Azure, sign that Partner Azure EA and commit to that $25K a year. And then, of course, make sure you're leveraging that $100 Azure credit for partners so you can get started if you haven't already. Cloud SureStep, this is a great site that covers basically everything that Todd and I are talking about throughout this entire series and more. Just go to the NPM site and search. We have links embedded here, but just search on NPM for Cloud SureStep. It's basically our dedicated cloud site for all of SMB throughout the world. So a lot of good resources, a lot of webinars, other webinar recordings on Azure and other cloud technologies as well. And then finally, here's a great resource slide. Has a SureStep link, has some resources to Azure in Open, right? We talked about purchasing Azure through your distributor. It's coming August 1st. Use the time now to get up to speed on what's coming. Of course, we're going to be talking about it in depth at WPC coming in July. But just make sure you're prepared when that hits August 1st. And you could stay up to date with Azure as well by joining the Yammer group. And there's an Azure YouTube channel. That concludes what we're talking about today, unless you have anything to add, Todd.
You know, the only thing I'll add is make sure, we totally understand there was a lot of information here today, and there's probably going to be a lot more information to follow. So stay in tune to the Cloud SureStep site that's focused on Azure information. There's going to be all kinds of resources that's going to continuously get updated. And of course, we've got our upcoming sessions that we're also going to be doing that you can definitely refer to.
All right. Thanks for joining, everyone.